Hello, my friends, hello, and welcome once again to the rustic Von Lodge. At least the kitchen of the rustic Von Lodge. So today, it's Wednesday, my epic comic book Wednesday. Now, every Wednesday, I talk about a Marvel epic collection, and Steve Donoghue on his channel talks about that same Marvel epic collection. And this week, it's going to be the first volume of the Fantastic Four, which I don't actually have a copy of, unusually. This is the cover of the first volume of the Fantastic Four Epic Collections. The world's greatest comic magazine is what it's called, because that was on most of the covers of the Fantastic Four back in the Silver Age. They always had world's greatest comic magazine on them. And it was a true claim for a long time, I think. So yes, the Fantastic Four, Volume 1. This has the first 18 issues of the Fantastic Four in it. Now, the reason I don't have the first Epic Collection is because I've got this big guy. This is the Fantastic Four Omnibus, which has, how many issues does this have? This has 30 issues. The Epic Collection Volume 1 has 18. I actually have the first couple omnibuses, which have roughly 60 issues in them, plus annuals, I believe. It's something like that. And it's basically the contents of the first three Epic Collections. So I don't have the first three Epic Collections. I don't need them because I've got this guy and the second omnibus, and I've got a third omnibus coming, even though I have Epic Collections of those issues. What do you do? I got to have all the omnibuses now of the Silver Age Fantastic Four. I got to. So the Fantastic Four, one of the most important comic books ever to show up. The reason being is because this heralded the Marvel age of comics. This was the first Marvel superhero comic book. Before this, you had the Atlas Comics. What would become Marvel was mostly at the time doing science fiction and horror, giant monster kind of stories, which I love. Not everybody's a fan. Steve Donoghue was not a fan of those, but I love them. It's easier to love them now, I think, than probably when they were coming out. But I love them. And the first issue of the Fantastic Four, you can really see the DNA of those monster comics that Lee and Kirby used to do. So the first 18 issues of the Fantastic Four were pretty great. They were groundbreaking because here Stan Lee introduced you to superheroes that acted like real people. They behaved like human beings, which at the time was pretty unusual. I am a big fan of DC Comics Silver Age comic books. I loved Silver Age Superman. I loved Silver Age Flash, Green Lantern, the Justice League. I have all the omnibuses of the Justice League all up through the Bronze Age. But it has to be admitted that if you just pick up a Justice League comic, every superhero had pretty much the same personality. They just had different costumes and different powers. But they basically all had the same personality. The great stuff about those stories, and there were some great Justice League stories, was the situation. It wasn't the people. And here it's the people, which immediately grabs you. And it must have really been something for a comic book fan to finally come across a comic book with characters that behaved like real people do, which in superhero comic books, at least, you didn't get up to this point. So this was revolutionary. It paved the way for other Marvel comics, particularly Spider-Man. We talked about Spider-Man last week. Spider-Man was probably the most important comic book as far as that is concerned, as far as being an influence on other comics and showing a comic book character with real human flaws and problems and foibles. But the Fantastic Four was first. This is the first family of Marvel Comics. So we're going to be talking about the first 18 issues of this comic. Now, because I've got an omnibus here as opposed to the Epic Collection, it'll lay flat real easy on the table so we can take a closer look at the issues themselves. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, let's take a closer look at the Fantastic Four. This is the magnificent first issue, and this is the great cover that features the Thing, Mr. Fantastic, the Human Torch, and the Invisible Girl fighting a monster that's crawling out of the ground. What a great looking cover, man. I would have just scooped this right up if I had seen it back in the day. You'll notice none of them are wearing costumes, or at least you'll see that Mr. Fantastic and the Invisible Girl are not, because Stanley kind of figured, they wouldn't have, if these characters existed in the real world, they wouldn't need costumes or secret identities or anything like that. That's not realistic enough. Of course, they get costumes by the third issue because everybody wants superheroes to be in costumes. But they never do bother with secret identities, so that's kind of unique, especially at this time. So we have this mysterious man here that's shooting these words into the sky. It's freaking out everybody because, they didn't have cell phones back in the day, so they needed this. So that calls all these mysterious characters together. We have this invisible woman who is called the Invisible Girl at this point in her career. And we have this big guy in the coat who's really the Thing, and he takes off his coat and he runs out, and he's just this horrifying looking monster. Now you can tell that Marvel Comics had just come off doing tons of monster comics. Because Jack Kirby, man, he can make some monsters. And he does a great job in this issue. Got the Thing crushing a car that's about to run into him. Then we have the Human Torch who shows up. Now, the Human Torch was a character from the golden age of comics. And so Marvel just took the name and the powers of the Human Torch and they gave him to teenage Johnny Storm. And he burns up all these jets, causing lots of expensive damage, which I imagine Reed Richards had to pay for later. And so Reed Richards saves Johnny Storm because Reed Richards here is really Mr. Fantastic. And they call him Mr. Fantastic because he can stretch any part of his body as long as he wants it to be. So, of course, he's Mr. Fantastic. And then we get the origin story of the Fantastic Four, where Reed Richards has created a rocket. They want to be the first human beings in space because this was 1961. Ben Grimm is a test pilot, and Mr. Fantastic, well, at this point, he's just Reed Richards. He's taken his girlfriend along and her brother. And so they go into outer space, and don't you know it, they run into cosmic rays, which, Ben Grimm warned them this could happen. And they crash land, and they all discover that they have powers. And Ben Grimm promptly turns into the Thing, which sucks for Ben Grimm, but he's an incredibly powerful, super strong monster. Now, originally as conceived, Stanley wanted the Thing to be kind of the heavy of the group. He wanted him to be kind of a bad guy. He had to be on the group because he got his powers along with everybody else. But you always were going to wonder if he was going to sabotage the group because of his grumpy, bad ways. But of course, everybody loved the Thing right away. He was everybody's favorite. So of course they had to scratch that idea. Look at that great monster. This is when they fight the Mole Man in this issue. Sorry about the glare. I can't seem to get rid of that. So they go to the Monster Island. They fight a bunch of monsters. Look at that guy. And of course they meet the Mole Man. As for me, I am the Mole Man. So yeah, they fight the Mole Man and the Mole Man's unhappy group of monsters. Mole Man, he hangs out, causes lots of trouble in future issues. Look at that guy. He's fantastic. Look at these monsters. That's just a great shot of monsters. Jack Kirby just cut loose in this. Now, of course, being Marvel comic characters, they have to run into aliens. And because aliens are always trying to conquer the Earth every 5 minutes in these older issues of the Fantastic Four. And these Skrulls from outer space can take any form that they want. So, of course, they take the form of the Fantastic Four and cause a bunch of trouble and frame the Fantastic Four for a bunch of dastardly deeds. And here's the Skrulls being all creepy and transforming into their alien selves. There's the mothership hovering the Earth up there. So the Fantastic Four are wanted, and they're captured by the army, but of course they escape right away because you can't hold the Fantastic Four in prison, and they've got to get out and take care of those aliens, which they promptly do. They take care of the aliens in about the dumbest way possible. They find this ship that's in the form of a water tower here. They fly to the mothership, and they show a bunch of clippings from comic books saying, hey, look, the Earth really has these things, these big monsters, as their defense force, and if you go down there, they're just going to unleash these horrible monsters on you. And the Skrulls, being the most gullible creatures in the universe, are like, damn, really? Okay, we'll go home now. We don't want to, run into these comic book creatures. So yeah, not the brightest aliens. Here's Ben Grimm. He occasionally will turn into back into Ben Grimm, but then he will turn right back into the Thing. This is a great transformation scene, by the way, by Jack Kirby. Just a great job on the artwork here. Awesome stuff. Jack Kirby obviously is at the top of his game in these early issues of the Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four was altogether his best stuff. Well, maybe Thor was. It's hard to pick between those two. So here in the third issue of the Fantastic Four, this is memorable because you get the costumes, you get their base, the Baxter Building. Johnny Storm, the Human Torch, has a new style. There's a new style of drawing him here. That's his look from here on out. So it's a pretty important issue. Not so much for the stupid villain. Miracle Man's pretty lame. In fact, the whole plot of this issue is pretty dumb. It's entertaining enough that it doesn't matter too much, but yeah, it's a pretty bad plot. In this one, they can't all be winners. But still, you get scenes like this. The First Family, definitely, these guys. So they defeat the Miracle Man because he's lame. And this fourth issue is the really good one because this is where Prince Namor, the Submariner, returns. Johnny Storm gets pissed off at the Thing and runs out and meets the Submariner in a flop house. Let's see if I can find that scene. Yeah, so Johnny Storm's hanging out in the flop house, as young kids did, I think, back in the 60s. I guess that happened. And he's reading a Submariner comic book because Submariner was a character from the Golden Age. And he runs across this incredibly strong, unhoused gentleman. And Johnny Storm's, wait, I know that guy. He's the Submariner of whom I was just reading a comic book about. See, the Submariner has amnesia here. He suffered some brain damage, which explains a few things about the Submariner. There's a issue of the Avengers where he runs into Captain America. He doesn't recognize Captain America, of course, because he still has brain damage and his memory is still cloudy. And Captain America doesn't recognize him because Captain America was just on a hunk of ice, which gave him temporary amnesia as well about certain events that were inconvenient to Stan Lee in World War II. And of course, Submariner also doesn't recognize the Human Torch, even though he knew a Human Torch back in World War II. Again, like I said, brain damage, obviously. He does eventually recover. But here he dives down and he sees that his people his people's city anyway has been destroyed by human beings' atomic tests, because we always like to have atomic tests right at the shoreline of New York. And so Submariner comes out and he's like, I'm going to wage war against human beings. And he becomes a Fantastic Four villain, a great one. And so this is just a great issue. The Thing has to save the day here. Again, you can tell that they just did a bunch of monster comics, Marvel comics, because we got some great monstery scenes. And this is the issue where Submariner meets Sue Storm and falls in love. So we have the romantic triangle, the love triangle that happens. And yeah, great issue. The next issue is equally important. Oh, this is an omnibus, not a Epic Collection. So we have the Fantastic Four fan page, which are in the omnibuses, but not in the Epic Collections for some reason. That's unfortunate. And of course, we have everybody's favorite villain. It should be everybody's favorite villain, Doctor Doom. Doctor Doom is awesome. Look at this guy. he invented a time machine, but he's not dopey enough to go back in time himself to get Blackbeard's treasure. No, he decides to get the Fantastic Four to do it. So he sends the Fantastic Four back in time, or at least 3 of them. He's got Sue Storm a prisoner here because it's the 60s, and you have to have Sue Storm be the prisoner. So they go back in time to search for Blackbeard's treasure. Turns out Blackbeard is actually the Thing. You didn't know that, and neither did they. But yeah, it turns out that Blackbeard was actually the Thing. And this has some logical inconsistencies, which I'm sure Steve Donoghue will point out. He will point out all the logical inconsistencies in this issue. But that's okay. It's a great issue, and I loved it. I love how the time machine works, too. It's like this big square in the sky that lowers and on top of them, and they end up back in their own time. Great artwork in this issue. It's fantastic all the way through. Of course, they defeat Dr. Doom. And yeah, it's awesome. And of course, the very next issue, Dr. Doom teams up with Submariner. Submariner, remember, is still brain damaged. And so he makes really bad decisions, like the decision to join up with Dr. Doom. And this is a great, great issue. It's fantastic. The Fantastic Four go on the shortest vacation ever. They immediately run into trouble because Dr. Doom is out there meeting up with Submariner. He's like, hey, team up. I'm Dr. Doom. You can trust me. You can trust a guy named Dr. Doom. What's the worst that can happen? Submariner. So, and of course, Sue Storm. She's got kind of a thing for Submariner because he's kind of a hot guy, I guess. You know, love triangle. Now, Dr. Doom grabs the whole Baxter building and carries it off into space. And he screws over, of course, his partner, who he leaves behind on the Baxter building area. But look at this magnificent shot. This is the Baxter building flying above New York, and you've got the jets flying beneath the Baxter building. That is just great. Jack Kirby has so much great stuff that pops up in this issue. And as these issues go along, originally the Fantastic Four were kind of grumpy. They were always fighting among themselves, and they still do that from time to time. But they are becoming a real family. And you really sense that as these issues come along. This is the Puppet Master. He's important not so much for himself, but because the Puppet Master's niece, Alicia, becomes the Thing's girlfriend. She's blind, and I guess that's why it's okay for her to be in love with the Thing. She's really a nice person, Alicia. And this is great. This is when the Fantastic Four go broke. It's because Reed Richards is terrible at investing, and he lost all their money. So they have to go and make a movie. And the person who's making the movie is, of course, the Submariner. This is my favorite scene of all, when they don't have any of their stuff anymore. They don't have their Fantastic car. So the Fantastic Four has to hitchhike on the side of the road to get to Hollywood. We'll all laugh about this one day. It's great. What can I say? It's fantastic. Of course, there's the Submariner as a movie mogul. It's fantastic. And of course, it's not really a movie. He's just trying to destroy the Fantastic Four, which, of course, they should have known. But what do you do? Great fight between the Thing and the Fantastic Four. But then, of course, he becomes Ben Grimm again for 5 seconds. And that's why he loses that fight. But they do make the movie. So they get all their money back. So that's good. So the issues... And of course, this is the issue where Dr. Doom trades brains with Mr. Fantastic. So we got Mr. Fantastic looking all evil because he's really Dr. Doom. Great stuff. Just brilliant, brilliant stuff. My favorite comic book from Marvel in the Golden Age. And like I said, they really became a family. And so they always acted like real human beings. And they also acted, like people that genuinely cared about each other. At this point, the Thing is just a great guy. Everybody loves the Thing. At this point, he's the ever-loving blue-eyed Thing who always knows when it's clobbering time. So great stuff. And yeah, I could go on, but I think you guys get the idea about why the Fantastic Four were so great. Happy birthdays to Sue. Just great stuff. So yeah, Fantastic Four. I really wish that the Epic Collection had these. If you want all this stuff, you know, you can still get the first omnibus of the Fantastic Four too. It's about $100 or a little less depending on where you get it. But yeah, the Fantastic Four. They're awesome. This is the world's greatest comic magazine. As it says right there at the top, they very helpfully tell you that. So yeah, the Fantastic Four. Yes, so that was a closer look at the issues themselves. I hope you enjoyed it. The Fantastic Four. This was a heck of a comic book. I'm looking forward to hearing what Steve Donoghue has to say. If he can tear himself away from Star Trek. Star Trek 2021 is going on right now, and Steve Donoghue is reading a Star Trek book every day. I wish I could keep up that pace, man. I would if I could. But if he can tear himself away to make a video about the Fantastic Four, and he will, he can tell us what he thinks about this stuff, so tune in for that. I'll link Steve Donoghue's channel down below. And yeah, Fantastic Four, it's great. And so catch me next week for next week's Epic Comic Book Wednesday, when we'll be talking about a fella called Captain America. Okay, guys, I'll catch you next time.